Now time for discussion number 2. You see, what India has planned or has been planning to do for a very long time, has successfully done it also in the past, was initiated again in the form of repopulating and redeveloping frontier villages. Now this is being seen as a strategy to not just retain frontier positions, but also build an intelligence system, also build an awareness system where people don't desert those places, and it remains of strategic importance. Now obviously this has not gone down well with China. The latest, Amit Shah, Home Minister, went to Arunachal Pradesh for this very same program, and China believes that this is China's territory. Is this a robust move by New Delhi to checkmate China? And should this be done more often? I mean, here is a country which is entering other countries and populating villages. Certainly we can do that in our own country, on our own soil. Let's start this discussion. Brahma Chelani is a strategic affairs expert. Lieutenant General Rameshwar Yadav, former Director General Infantry of the Indian Army, is with us. Professor Yukteswar Kumar, former First Asian Deputy Mayor of Bath. We also have Dr. Tara Kartha, former Director of the National Security Council Secretariat. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Mr. Brahma Chelani, to you first. Do you feel that this is a strategic and an important move and should happen more often than it happens?
Well, I agree with that, but first things first. Which country recognizes China's claim to Arunachal Pradesh? Not even Pakistan. So it's just China that asserts its claim. Second, it was 6 years ago that Xi Jinping publicly called upon Tibetan herdsmen to settle in border villages and become, quote unquote, guardians of Chinese territory. So this program by China to populate unpopulated frontier areas has been in motion for at least 6 years, and India finally has started to repay China in kind by deciding to also establish border villages. Better late than never. But it's important to remember that the Chinese border villages are not just populated by ordinary villagers. A majority of the people in the villages that China has set up are militiamen, paramilitary people. They also have some Tibetan nomads, for example, but it's largely a security settlement. And not only are they planted settlers, new military infrastructure and roads also come up around these villages. So it's clearly this village building spree has a clear security/military dimension. And step by step, China is seeking to change ground realities by creating new militarized civilian settlements. And this is in keeping with the 2021 Land Borders Law, which called for advancing a civil-military fusion strategy through border settlements. So there is a well thought out strategy that China is pursuing, and India needs to respond with a long-term strategy.
Lieutenant General Yadav, do you feel that this is an effective long-term strategy going forward?
Firstly, I would like to further add to what Mr. Brahma Chelani said. The way China is going, it is one of the variants of their Salami slice policy that they have. Settle the civil population there, which is loyal to them, create a lot of infrastructure for their army. And similarly, now that we have done it, though it is a little late, but it is a very good policy and it is warranted. So as to we stake claims in our border areas. And the Home Minister, he has inaugurated this village in a place called Kibitu. Now Kibitu, I've been to that area. It is the easternmost tip of our country, and it is a Lohit Valley. And during 1962, so China had come here, the famous Battle of Wolong in this area. So there is a very subtle message also India conveying to China, look, we are going to settle our people in the remotest of areas and see to it that we exert our sovereignty in this area, that is Arunachal Pradesh. And we must also remember there is a principle of settled population when we have when we show that these areas are ours. So this scheme is also devoted towards this kind of a principle, and so that we can show that we have a settled population in remotest of these areas, all the 6 to 7 valleys that we have in our Arunachal Pradesh and elsewhere other 4 to 5 states. So this is the way we are exerting our sovereignty and convey a message to China, look, stay away from these areas. These are our areas, it is our population, and we are going to take care of them. And this is a plan for the development of remote area, which is part of our democratic push.
Yeah, okay. Dr. Kartha, you see, right now Mr. Brahmachalani said that you don't have a normal settlement happening along the Chinese border or in areas which are technically not even part of China. The settlements there are being done by China are of specifically trained, translocated, relocated people who will be of strategic military importance to China in the wake of a conflict. Do you feel that this step that India has taken of building, guardians of the frontier will be able to match this strategy of China, of getting in nomads, of getting in people, translocating them?
No, at one level, it is a policy which they are talking of vibrant villages. It's set in the larger development policy of India. I mean, that's how they framed it, that this is something we need to do. And, if any of us, you go to any villages in, say, Uttarakhand, you go in Himachal Pradesh, there is a lack of job opportunities. There's a lack of infrastructure. There's a lack of development. So this serves that. But when the fact that, as the general says, that this was said in Arunachal Pradesh, is definitely it's a message. But one of the things we used to do was that much of your retired people from the armed forces would go back and settle in those villages. I mean, these were all areas from where you would, especially in Himachal and in Uttarakhand, you would pick them up and they would go back there, right? And that sort of became your friendly force in those areas. I'm not sure how that's going to happen anymore because you've switched to the Agnipath scheme. But apart from that, the fact that you will now develop extensive linkages across into Arunachal is a very, very important factor. Into Arunachal and all border areas, thereby establishing not just quick connectivity where you can move your troops quickly, move your supplies quickly, but also the fact that there is a robust presence in those areas. I mean, there is like I said, there is a basic fact that youth are leaving the villages because there are no jobs. So this is an attempt to rectify that as well in the development framework. But I don't see how China can even object. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. Given especially the fact that, I mean, look, they talk of double standards, right? They talk of double standards all the time. What is China talking of in terms of the Ukraine conflict? It's talking of sovereignty of countries being a basis as of the peace plan that it proposes. What kind of double standards are these?
Okay. All right. Professor Yukteswar Kumar would want to know your views on this strategy. I mean, you see on the face of it, how can there be an objection, any objection on India trying to populate and develop its own villages? Where is the problem?
Of course, but one needs to go into the history. And of course, any status by China should not be changed by force or by any escalation or use of force, which could very adversely impact the global peace and stability. But China being China, it does not recognize the international border. McMahon Line, for example, it says it is illegal since 1914. And China being China, of course, it has developed an Indian mentality has to also grow up from the 1950s of India-China Bhai paradigm. So the Indian interlocutors, Indian mandarins, Indian bureaucrats, Indian scholars have to also grow up from that mentality, which is being seen now, certainly, because today's Amit Shah's visit and Indian government's very big stand that they are obviously averse to any renaming of villages or places in China. It is indeed ridiculous because if you see just last week, China on its own changed name of 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh, what it calls Changnan. Now, Changnan, for example, I'll give you some of the names they have changed. They call Tawang, which obviously is very well known Tawang area. Now, just calling, if you read Chinese, Tawang is not a proper Chinese name, but just a translation of Indian or Northeast Indian places, geographical names. So they are deliberately doing this. For example, my name, if somebody starts calling me Yu De Suo, that's my Chinese name, my identity, my originality, my heritage, that cannot be changed.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. You will not suddenly become Chinese.
That's what they are doing.
Yeah.
That's what they are doing. If you read the Chinese names, they're just translating it, not its originality. So, of course, it is not in China's, it was not in the history books of China.
But then,
that they were in China.
while you say that, Professor Kumar, Brahmachalani, you see, salami slicing and claiming of territory has been an old Chinese game. It has been going on for a very long time. This is being seen as one of the many efforts that India is taking to not just regain its borders, but also prevent, basically meet strength with strength. What more needs to be done as we very tactfully fight this battle with China?
That's a good question, Sanket. To follow the Chinese strategy of incremental territorial aggrandizement, India must raise local scout forces that are modeled on the Ladakh scouts, but are independent of the army. These will be sons of the soil, defending their own territory. They will serve as the best defense in peacetime. Local people living in the mountain areas, Ladakhis, Himachalis, Uttarakhandis, Sikkimis, Arunachalis, and Tibetans, are best suited to safeguard India's borders. Why? Because they have distinct genetic features that allow them to breathe easily at very high altitudes. Such local people will be seeking to defend their own lands from an external aggressor. In other words, they have a major stake in border defense being effective. So the Ladakh Scouts model can be extended across the Himalayan frontier. Second, it's important to impart some rudimentary military training to the people that we will settle in these border villages. It's very important because, as I mentioned, the Chinese are settling militiamen in their frontier villages. And finally, India needs to beef up its frontier forces. The under-resourced Indo-Tibetan Border Police, which is under the command of the Home Ministry, not the Defense Ministry, needs special attention. We have to equip the Indo-Tibetan Border Police units with advanced gear and place them under the command of the army. That would signal to China that the doors of an open door are over.
I think that's a significant point that is being made. I believe we also have Andrew K.P. Leong. He's an independent China strategist who's now joining us. Andrew, first of all, I just want to know from you, where is the problem if India is populating and developing its own villages along the border?
Well, I think that this border disputes has been poisoning the relationship of these two great countries for far, far too long. I think that both sides, of course, are right to defend their own perceived territory. And of course, the line of actual control and all these problems date back before the independence of India to British India. You look at what happened during that time. There was a lot of excursions into China's territory, and all these problems are handed down through the years, poisoning the relationship between two countries. Now, I think that there is no point trying to score brownie points. All these talks, all the time I've been appearing on this show, on your station, on other TV channels, it's all about brownie points. It's not going to solve the problem. How can you expect China to kneel down and concede its claimed territory? Neither could China expect India to do the same. And these two countries have a lot more in common. And of course, you can see that both sides are at least not at loggerheads over Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia. I mean, India is not going to be at the United States beck and call as far as the relationship with Russia is concerned. So I think that to define the relationship in these two countries just because of the border disputes is really getting a little bit tired. And then the kind of trumping one's own chest, just scoring brownie points
Mr.
on
Andrew,
either side.
the problem here is, Dr. Karta, you see the problem here is it appears as if sermons are being given at a time when a country is only trying to defend its interests, and that too against a neighbor who's far too adventurous, settling villages not just in its own territory but in neighboring countries also. And there are satellite images available.
I think it's, I mean, it is ridiculous to assume that, that we are the ones who are trying to create problems. Who's renaming villages? Who's claiming a territory 100 kilometers into Bhutan? I mean, this is not us doing it. It is China doing it. Of course you have common interests, but I'm amazed that Beijing can't see it. And why is it doing this? I mean, just look at the fact. See, try and imagine in 2017 when the Doklam incident took place, India took a lot of measures to make sure that we didn't escalate rhetoric. We didn't even want the US to talk about it. That was the kind of stance we had in 2017. Now look how things have changed. You have a US Congress making a resolution saying Arunachal Pradesh is part of India. There is an India-US exercise going on. Why has this taken place? After all, it is the continuous acts by China of renaming villages. I mean, this is entirely unprovoked. How can you justify this? And that too, that this claim on Arunachal Pradesh is being made after the agreement which we signed in 2003, remember? When we had recognized Tibet and we had a sort of agreement on border trade, then nothing was said about Arunachal. And where did all this come from? So it is entirely this push by China and spoiling a relationship that potentially has tremendous avenues for cooperation.
Yeah. I mean, it's not for want of dialogue as far as India is concerned that we are reaching a situation like this. I mean, there have been various efforts in the past also. The jury is out. Thank you very much for joining us on this discussion.